Hey guys, tonight we drift back into a world without compasses, GPS, or even paper maps, just ocean spray, superstition, and the hope that the stars don't lie. You're standing on a creaking dock somewhere along the mighty Yangtze River. It's twilight, and everything smells like river mud and fish guts. Your breath clouds the air, but that could be nerves or just the stench of fermented bean paste from the cargo hold. Behind you, old men chew lotus root and mutter blessings. Ahead, a wooden junk ship sways gently, its rigging whispering lullabies in the breeze. You're about to set sail across waters that have swallowed ships whole, and here's the twist: there is no compass on board. No glowing screen, no polite robotic voice rerouting you. Just the moon above, the wind's hush, and a deck full of sailors who might be guessing more than they let on. You probably won't survive this, to be honest, but at least you'll die confused and slightly seasick. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these sleepy voyages go. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step aboard as the crew loosens the ropes. The hull creaks like it's stretching its back. Lanterns sway from the mast, casting flickering shadows on the deck. The moon hangs low, so big and close you half expect it to drip honey. You can feel it in your bones. This is going to be a long night. The river pulls the ship forward with a silent authority, like a dragon tugging your feet beneath the floorboards. This isn't your world anymore. It belongs to the river, the night, and men who call the waves by name. The captain doesn't say much, he's already listening. Not to you, but to the river itself. To the rhythm of the current. To the ripple of sandbanks beneath the surface. He spits once casually, as though marking a thought, and then, with a hand motion barely more than a flicker, the sails unfurl. Wind lurches into them like a trapped animal, and suddenly you're moving. Behind you, city lights shrink like dying stars. Ahead, a black ribbon of water coils through the land like a serpent asleep. This is the Yangtze. Yes, but to these sailors, it's also a timeline, a storyteller, and a map. You hear a few words passed around the deck, names like Golden Mouth, Dragon's Elbow, Three Finger Current. These aren't just poetic nonsense. These are landmarks. No compass needed when the river itself remembers where it's going. A cabin boy, no older than 13, nudges you with a steamed bun and mutters, "Smell the fish" means Wuju's close. You sniff, and he's right, something briny and sharp cuts the humid air, a scent drifting from the tributaries that join here. That's your first lesson on this river. Smell can guide you home. As the boat glides deeper into night, stars poke through the clouds like curious eyes. The crew moves like shadows, adjusting sails, checking ropes. No shouting, just rhythm. You hear a deep, droning hum, and realize a group of oarsmen are chanting a river song, half lullaby, half war hymn. One man slaps the hull 3 times before ducking below deck. When you ask why, he says, "Old habit. Tells the river we're peaceful." Historians still argue whether early Chinese river navigation was more science or sorcery. Frankly, from where you're standing, it feels like both. There's no modern logic to this, just instinct, tradition, and a very real fear of offending water spirits. You spot something odd near the helm. Rows of bones tied together with red twine. Rat bones by the look of it. The first mate catches your stare. "Luck charms?" he grunts. "Wife makes 'em." You nod like that explains anything. Because honestly, who are you to judge? You pass under a bridge so low you duck, even though you don't have to. Etched along its stone base are strange grooves, worn down by decades, maybe centuries of sailors brushing offerings against it. One sailor does it now, rubs an orange peel against the stone and whispers a name you can't catch. When you ask what that was about, he shrugs. Navigation. The night deepens, and a low mist slinks across the surface of the water. You're barely aware of how far you've traveled. It feels like the river is unspooling time itself, drawing you forward not by distance, but by memory. At some point, you feel the ship tilt subtly, like it's leaning into an invisible curve. No one announces it. No one adjusts course. The captain just narrows his eyes and mutters, "River's turning." And it does. Smoothly. Without a compass, a GPS, or even a single word of debate. You lie back against a crate of dried mushrooms and let the rhythm of the water seep into your spine. The stars are brighter now, Boulder. Some of the crew are already sleeping, their breaths rising like little ghosts in the cold air. Somewhere below deck, you hear the groan of cargo settling, or maybe it's the river laughing at you. And you realize this isn't just a boat ride. It's a lesson in trust. Not just in the river or the crew, but in an older kind of knowing. One that doesn't need a compass to tell it where to go. You wake up with the taste of salt on your lips. Not the sharp, metallic kind from a mouthful of blood, though, after last night's rough waves. You wouldn't be surprised, but the grainy, dried-out tang that says you've crossed into something new. The river behind you has widened and flattened, and the water now moves differently beneath your feet. It no longer whispers like a stream it rolls, thick and heavy, with a deep pulse you can feel in your ankles. You've made it to the estuary, somewhere in the dark. The fresh water gave up its fight. You're in the mouth of the sea now, where river surrenders to tide and everything feels just a bit uncertain. The wind hits differently. It smells like kelp, iron, and very old secrets. You step out from the shelter of the deck awning and squint. The sky is gray not from clouds but from haze, a kind of sea-borne breath that blurs the edges of the world. Welcome to the salt zone. The crew is quieter today. Less banter. More murmuring. This isn't home territory anymore. In the rivers, they joke and tell ghost stories. Out here, they speak in half sentences and side eyes. The captain chews on a root you can't name and watches the horizon like he's daring it to blink first. You catch a whiff of something roasted peanuts. No, not out here. But someone else sniffs the air at the same time and nods. Salt fires, he says. They burn seaweed on the shore to harvest brine. You stare at him. The coastline isn't even visible. He shrugs. Wind carries everything. And just like that, your idea of direction shifts again. Not north, not south scent. Navigation in this part of the sea isn't about coordinates. It's about knowing what brine smells like when it's been filtered through marsh reeds versus when it's been steeped in sand. You wonder, idly, how many navigational mishaps began with, "I thought that was fish sauce, not clam smoke"? The boat veers slightly without warning. The helmsman doesn't explain, but you notice he's watching a ripple in the water that moves against the current. A tide bubble. Someone whispers, "That's your next clue." You watch carefully and see it too, a faint froth line. Like a ghost trail from an invisible oar. No maps, just memory. That bubble means a shallow shelf up ahead. One that's wrecked more than a few overconfident merchant ships. Historians still argue whether ancient Chinese sailors learned these things through systematic study or pure repetition. Probably both. But out here, surrounded by fog, it doesn't feel academic. It feels like the boat is sniffing its way forward like a rat in a cellar. Only instead of cheese, you're aiming for survival. The first mate walks by, dragging a long pole tipped with goat hair. Every now and then, he dips it into the water and mutters a number. You ask what he's doing. Salinity check, he grunts. You learn where you are by how your tongue curls. He hands you the pole. You dip it, taste the end, and recoil. It's like licking rust. He grins, close to Wenjo. Almost open sea. No one's looking at stars right now. The haze has swallowed them whole. Instead, they're watching birds. Not soaring ones, but squat little brown shapes flitting just above the waves. Coastal crows, someone says. They don't go more than 5 li from land. You count them 1, 2, 4, then they vanish. Left or right? The crew leans left. The boat follows. It's unsettling. How much you have to let go of logic. There's no compass swinging predictably on a chain. No clock. No logbook you can read. Just smells. Birds. The sound of waves. And yes, superstition. One sailor fingers a pouch of dried tangerine peel before spitting over the rail. For the sea god, he mutters. You're not sure if he means it or just grew up repeating it. Your shoes are sticky with dried salt. Your mouth tastes like brackish soup. And still, you sail. Later that morning, though, morning is a guess. Since the sun's still hiding, you spot another ship in the distance. It's motionless. No sails. The crew stares at it like it's a ghost. You ask why? The captain frowns. That's a fishing boat. Should have gone back by now. He leans forward, tilts his head. Dead drift. They lost the wind. And just like that, everything on your ship changes. The sails are adjusted not to follow wind, but to catch its cousin, a subtle air current. Barely enough to move a curtain, but enough to creep forward if you know how to listen. The crew ties strips of silk to the yardarms, watching which way they flutter. You hear no orders, only small nods and muttered confirmations. You take a deep breath and try to feel it too, that wind that's more suggestion than force. It's like trying to hear a whisper in a crowd, but somehow, they do. And they adjust the sails accordingly. Fringe theories still float around about these old sailors using elemental qui to navigate subtle forces no modern instrument can detect. While that's not exactly taught in universities, standing here feeling the almost imperceptible shift in the air, you're tempted to believe. The ship presses forward again. The ghost boat disappears behind you. Below deck, you find a cabin where salt maps are carved into driftwood. They're not diagrams, they're texture-scratched swirls, knotted lines, divots you can run your fingers along. Each one marks a tide shift, a whirlpool, or a place where the fish no longer come. Not charts exactly, but whispers in wood. You press your palm against one, and your fingers tingle like they've touched something still alive. By nightfall, the haze lifts a little. Not fully. Just enough to show a sliver of moon, and one brave star clinging to its corner of the sky. A sailor notices, hums a note, and the others join in. Not lyrics, but tones each linked to a direction. A vocal compass passed through the lungs. You lean against the railing, eyes dry from salt air, and feel the ocean widen beneath you. You're no longer in the cradle of the river. You're in the arms of something vast and patient. It doesn't care about your schedules or destinations. It only respects those who listen. And so, you listen. By now, you've stopped expecting things to make sense. The sea doesn't operate on logic, and neither do these sailors. You've stepped into a floating riddle where every answer smells faintly of fish and feels vaguely damp. Tonight, you're perched beside an old man named Heng. He's wrapped in so many layers of faded cloth he looks like a dumpling with a beard. His hands are leathery, stained with tar and tea, and they never stop moving adjusting ropes, brushing splinters off the deck, or flicking invisible dust from the air. But his eyes are locked on the sky. There, he murmurs, pointing with a chipped nail. You look up and see nothing but stars, thousands of them, bleeding silver through the darkness. The Milky Way sprawls above you like a shattered porcelain plate. It's beautiful and slightly terrifying. Heng draws slow circles in the air. That's the heart of the tortoise, he says, referring to a cluster of stars that look more like spilled rice than a tortoise. Tells us where south used to be. Before the compass. Chinese sailors used celestial navigation, the practice of reading the stars, not just for stories, but for survival. They'd track constellations that rose and fell in reliable rhythms, watching how certain stars danced across the sky at different times of year. Right now, you're staring at what modern astronomy calls Altair and Vega. But out here, they're the cowherd and the weaver girl, two celestial lovers separated by a river of light. Romantic. Yes, but also practical. Their positions signal the season, the angle of the heavens. And when the monsoons will turn traitor, you lie back on a coil of rope, watching the constellations swirl overhead. The ship doesn't rock, it sways like a lullaby. Hung hums a soft tune, then falls quiet. He's watching the stars shift by fractions. Tiny movements you wouldn't notice unless you've been staring at the same sky for 50 years. Historians still argue whether the average sailor truly understood the science of astronomy or just memorized patterns. Either way, it worked. And it's working now. The boat adjusts its heading by a whisper's width. The sails flare, then settle. The captain checks a notch on the mast, one carved so faintly it might be a scar. He nods. Northwest winds lying low. He says, "We stay true by the Oxstar. You're learning to speak their language. Not words, exactly, but glances, gestures, the hush of air and the creak of wood. It's like watching ballet performed by ghosts. Nearby, a younger sailor named Wei lights a stub of incense. Not for worship, he holds it upright on the railing, watching how the smoke leans. He squints at the flame, mutters something about humidity, then calls out a single syllable. The crew responds with a half-turn of the tiller. You can't help it, you laugh. You're navigating by candle smoke now. Why shrugs? It's what's available. The sea doesn't give you clarity. It gives you clues. There's a moment of stillness. The sails flap once, then almost imperceptibly the ship shifts its course again. Heng's eyes don't move. The stars say we're fine, but the wind's thinking about betrayal. It's a poetic way of saying storm's coming. And just like that, the crew kicks into quiet gear. Ropes are checked, canvas reefed, but no panic. Just preparation. You ask if they've checked the weather. Heng laughs so hard he snorts. You want me to ask a cloud how it feels today? The irony is they are checking the weather, but through sky lore, the kind passed down over fish bones and fermented rice, not weather apps. A sailor points out a dim star blinking on the horizon. Bad omen if it flickers, he says. Means moisture's creeping high. Another traces a low belt of stars, frowning. Too low. Sea gods sleeping. Is it real? Is it superstition? Does it matter when they're right more often than not? You remember a fringe theory you once heard that ancient Chinese navigators used star maps, not just to find direction, but to track emotional states of the sea. Ridiculous, you thought. But now, as you feel the way the boat leans into nothingness, like it's bracing for an argument, you're not so sure. Below deck, there's a hidden drawer near the food stores. Inside, wrapped in faded silk, is a hand-painted sky chart. Circles drawn in ochre, with silver ink dots for stars and brushstroke dragons curling between constellations. It's less map, more dream, but it matches the sky above. You run your fingers over it, and a bit of the ink comes off. Not ruined, just shared. Later, someone taps your shoulder and points up. The North Star. Steady, reliable. You focus on it, trying to use it like the sailors do to fix your mind and body in space. But the moment you blink, it's just another light in the dark. That's the trick. They don't look at the stars. They listen to them. You climb the rigging just for fun, or maybe to understand. Up there, with the wind in your ears and the cold biting your knuckles, the sky feels close enough to grab. You spread your arms, pretend you're the figurehead, and try to imagine navigating by this cosmic ocean. Suddenly, you hear a bell ring, a deep, resonant sound that vibrates through the wooden beams. No one reacts. You ask, "What was that?" "Star's in place," someone says. "It's the hour to turn west." "What star?" "What hour, you don't know." But the boat listens and turns. You fall asleep again under the stars, rocked gently by a sea that's both mystery and map. By now, your dreams have become salted and sun-bleached. You dream of boats that speak and stars that argue, of wind that whispers secrets too fast for you to catch. And when you wake, it's not the sun that greets you. It's the fluttering of sleeves in the wind. You sit up and see a man at the prow, arms stretched out like he's trying to hug the horizon. But he's not doing Tai Chi or reaching for a falling bird. No, he's reading the wind. His sleeves, wide and flowing, flap like soft banners. The direction, the angle, the strength, they all ripple through his clothes like messages you're too ignorant to understand. This is your next lesson. Sailors didn't just watch the wind, they wore it. These sleeve flags, as you come to call them, are more than theatrical flair. They're finely tuned indicators of what the sky intends. Some are stitched with tiny bells or dyed in stripes to make subtleties easier to read. The man nods slightly, then lowers his arms and speaks a single word: shift. Immediately, ropes are tugged, sails pivoted. You've changed direction again, guided by fabric. You follow him below deck where others are bent over what looks like a silk tapestry. But it's not for show. It's a wind chart, embroidered with color gradients and symbols. Not quite a map. Not quite a calendar. Think weather meets wishful thinking. Each section corresponds to a wind pattern during a particular moon phase. It's more interpretive dance than science. You try to understand it, but your brain feels like kelp soup. One of the older crew members chuckles. Takes 10 years and a bad marriage to read it right. Historians still debate how formalized these wind charts were. Were they used by all sailors or just elite merchant fleets? Some argue they were mnemonic devices, patterns you sang rather than studied. Out here, though, they're gospel. Back on deck, the sails groan as they adjust. And now you hear it, the whistle of wind slipping between masts. It's not random. There's rhythm to it. The crew doesn't just feel wind on their skin. They listen to how it snakes through ropes and wood. There's a superstition here. Too, if the wind whines like a child, the weather turns foul. If it hums like a flute, it favors you. Today, it's whistling like a drunk uncle. Not great, not terrible. You spot another ship in the distance. Smaller. Faster. The man at the helm wears feathers tied to his hat, rooster feathers, pointing backward. It's a crude version of your crew's sleeve method. You ask about it. Fishing boat, someone says. They watch the birds too, but they don't last long out here. Another sailor walks by, trailing what looks like a windsock made of eel skin. He hangs it from a pole and studies how it twists. Eastern twist, he mutters. Pushes rain inland. You want to ask where he learned that? But part of you doesn't want to ruin the magic. You find a patch of sun and lie down, watching clouds scrape across the sky like giant rice smudges. You're learning how wind bends them, tugs them into shapes that sailors interpret like old fortune tellers reading tea leaves. A flat-bottomed cloud. Good wind. A sudden bulge time to batten everything you can reach. One man walks by chewing a reed. Tastes bitter, he says. Wind's got teeth today. You laugh, but he's serious. There's a whole vocabulary here, one rooted in touch. Taste and sound, not just sight. And here's the kicker, no one ever writes it down. These aren't rules, they're inheritances. Passed from cracked lips to bruised ears, from calloused hands to trembling fingers. You only learn them by messing up and surviving. A gust of wind sends a shiver down the sails. Everyone pauses. You can almost feel the boat listen. The helmsman shifts his stance and the deck tilts just slightly. It's like the entire ship adjusts its shoulders to catch the breeze more politely. The sleeves at the prow lift again, now stiff with urgency. The reader frowns. Storm bending westward. Ropes fly. Orders barked. They're rerouting not just to avoid a storm, but to follow the corridor it leaves behind. A sailor explains. After the big winds, there's calm water, like a ghost footprint. Fringe belief. Sure, but it works often enough to feel like science. Or sorcery. The captain emerges, tapping a gourd tied to his belt. Inside is a dried frog. Don't ask why you'll only get a wink and he's our wind god intern. You give the frog a respectful nod. Now, you begin to understand they're not just reacting to the wind, they're dancing with it. Predicting it by feel and pattern. Treating it like a partner in a very temperamental relationship. The ship doesn't move despite the wind, but because of it. As the day fades, but you see another oddity, a small sail. Square and red, raised high on a secondary mast. Emergency wind flag. Someone says, if it flaps flat, we're stuck. If it dances, we go. Right now. It sways like it's enjoying itself. And that means you're moving again. Chasing a breeze no one can see, but everyone here seems to know by heart. You lean back, letting the wind comb your hair like an inattentive ant. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls faintly. Not a threat, just a reminder that the sky has moods, and the wind carries gossip. You close your eyes and feel it move across your cheeks, your chest, your knees. A message without words. And somehow, you're beginning to understand. You're getting used to the sway now. Your legs anticipate the boat's moods like they've grown their own sea legs, which is strange. Because your actual legs still bruise like peaches. The wind has gentled, and the crew's movements have slowed from brisk knots to lazy circles. That can mean only one thing: it's time to listen to the sea itself. You shuffle to the prow, where a sailor is hunched like he's praying or listening. His hand trails over the side, fingertips skimming the surface. His eyes are closed. You think maybe he's napping upright until he mutters, "We're crossing a cold tongue." You blink. "A what?" "A cold current," he explains. Never looking up. It's hugging the seafloor. Climbing up. Feels like snow on your fingers. You kneel and try it yourself. The water isn't just wet, it's layered. There's a sudden chill, a silent shift in density. It's a shiver that starts at your fingertips and climbs your spine, like the sea itself is changing masks. This, apparently, is how they navigate now, by reading the currents with their skin. Sailors trained their bodies like instruments. They'd lie flat against the deck and feel the boat's rhythm against the wood. A thrum meant shallow reefs. A lazy roll signaled deep water. You lie down, press your ear to the timber, and you swear you hear it, a distant, underwater breath. Someone taps your foot. It's the same boy from the Yangtze, the one with the bun and the sharp nose. Captain says reef ahead. Feel it. You don't. You just feel stupid. But then he points, and there it is, a dark ripple under the surface. Not quite a shadow. Not quite a wave. Just a presence. The captain joins you, holding a wooden bowl filled with crushed shells and fish bones. He dips his fingers in, flicks the mixture overboard, and waits. Watch the scatter, he says. The flakes drift and twist. Some catch and circle, some spin outward fast. That's the current telling us the reef's edge. You nod solemnly, like that makes sense. It doesn't. Not yet. Historians still argue whether these observations were consistent science or just lucky guesses polished into wisdom. But when you've spent half your life trying not to get eaten by the ocean, luck eventually starts to look like method. Later, the crew strings a weighted rope off the stern, a thin line tied with knotted bits of cloth at regular intervals. As it trails behind, they count how fast the knots disappear under the surface. It's an old method measuring current speed by letting the sea pull you backwards. You watch one of the knots vanish, then another, faster than you expected. We're drifting east. Someone says, the helm adjusts again. Just a touch. But it's not just the currents they feel, it's how the ship reacts to them. This boat is alive in their minds. A stubborn old ox or a flirtatious dancer. Depending on her mood, you're starting to pick up her quirks. When she grumbles beneath your feet, she's resisting a side current. When she tilts just so, she's caught in a rising tide vein. You eat lunch dried fish, pickled radish, and something that might have once been a plum, and watch as the horizon flickers. Not from waves, but from heat and water combining into mirages. The crew points to one. That shimmer means we're near warm upwellings. Maybe squid soon. They see food where you see hallucination. Below deck, there's a strange collection of objects in a net bag, polished stones. Broken bits of coral. Small sand-filled gourds. They call it a touch bag. It's part game, part training tool. Young sailors reach in blind and guess where each object came from. A smooth stone from the Pearl River. A jagged shell from the coast near Fuzhou. You try it, fail miserably. Not bad. The captain lies. You felt a barnacle and guessed bread. As the sun begins to lean westward, someone calls out 2 quick clicks of the tongue. Everyone freezes. A faint bubbling noise rises to the surface, like a teapot simmering below the keel. Mud vent, the cook says. Undersea gas. Means we're off course. You blink. You can hear gas. She snorts. You can't. You listen harder. And yeah, there's something down there. Whispering. A soft gurgle that makes your ribs itch. They steer left. The bubbling fades. There's a superstition here too if the current pulls your shadow away from your body. It's time to turn back. You try it. Your shadow is where it should be for now. Later, they unfurl a woven net across the deck. You assume it's for drying fish. But a sailor walks its length barefoot, pausing at each corner. He closes his eyes and mumbles, "She's off balance." They rebalance the cargo by feel. Apparently, the boat lists in subtle ways when she's swimming wrong. Another trick, a plank dipped into the water like a tongue. The taste tells them about sediment. Too chalky. Someone mutters, "We're closer to river runoff than open sea." You taste it. Yep, definitely not Fiji water. Fringe theory alert. There's an old belief that trained sailors could feel magnetic lines through the soles of their feet. Modern science would call it nonsense. But after 5 days on this ship, your toes swear they can sense when the boat's lying. At dusk, someone marks a small wooden tablet with soot and fish oil. A wave pattern etched by hand. They'll use it tonight not as a map, but a story. When the sea sings this rhythm, land is within a night's reach. The sailor tells you. You sit at the rail and look out into the watery endlessness. No compass, no clocks, just a ship full of people who have turned the invisible movements of the sea into a language. And slowly, it's starting to whisper to you too. By now, the sea has taken on the rhythm of your breathing, or maybe it's the other way around. You've stopped questioning it. The ship rolls gently in a familiar, almost maternal sway. Each creak of the timber feels like an old story retelling itself in your bones. And here's your next lesson. You don't measure distance by miles out here. You count the waves. It begins subtly. A sailor stands mid-deck, barefoot and still. He's not meditating, he's measuring. Every rise and fall of the ship marks 1 unit of travel. Not by time, not by knots, but by wave rhythm. Like counting heartbeats. If the heart were a few billion gallons of mood-swinging water, the captain steps out, holding a length of knotted rope. Each knot marks an average wave spacing. 42 knots to Shuang Yu, he murmurs. You do the math. That's not nautical speed. That's wave count. They know the route so well they can literally measure their progress in swells. You join in, nodding slightly with each roll. It's hypnotic. Rise, sway, dip, rise. The sea speaks a steady, ancient lullaby. Eventually, your body just knows when to count. You lose track of time. Of course you do. That's the point. Someone hands you a ladle of something hot and slightly fishy. Squid broth, he says. Good for memory. You drink it. It tastes like regret, but does warm your fingers. The old man next to you chuckles. Now you'll remember every wrong wave. Below deck, they've scratched tally marks into the beams. Not days at sea wave intervals. A curved mark for each 100. You run your fingers along them. They feel like fingerprints of people who sailed this ship long before you. Each curve a mile. Each knot a story. Historians still argue whether this wave counting was ever systematic or just something passed down through oral tradition. But here, it's religion. You miss a wave. You miss your target, and with no compass. No margin for error. Later, you spot a crewman carving patterns into a bit of wood. Tiny ripples and arches. Wave maps, he says. Like that's the most obvious thing in the world. You tilt your head, squint. This one's for spring, he adds. Waves get longer when the river gods sleep. You nod like you understand. You don't. But you're beginning to enjoy the confusion. At midday, the ship hits a strange roll, smoother, deeper. Ocean swell. Someone calls. Not river waves, not coastal chop. This is the deep breath of the open sea. Wide, patient, dangerous in its own quiet way. You start counting again. 1, 2, 3, a pause, then 4. Someone corrects you. That pause was a ghost swell. Comes from old typhoons. You don't argue. The sea's memory is long. For training, the younger sailors have a game. One blindfolds himself and stands on deck, balancing as the ship rocks. He tries to name the direction of the wind and the wave source. Just by feel, north-northwest. Short period, sharp crest, he says. They cheer he's right. You try. Fail. Nearly fall overboard. You ask the captain how long it took him to learn this. He sighs. I was 12. Got lost once. Thought I was headed west. Counted wrong. Ended up in a sandbar graveyard. Whole boat cracked. He pulls up his sleeve, shows a scar shaped like a crooked anchor. Learn to listen after that. The crew has sayings, repeated like spells. A short wave lies they chant. A long one waits. 2 peaks mean a trick. Foam speaks louder than wind. You whisper them under your breath like prayers. They're oddly comforting. Even your dreams start to shift. You dream of waves forming sentences, of swells that hum lullabies. You wake to find yourself counting under your breath. 41, 42, 43. Like a metronome keeping time on a journey older than math. One sailor wears a necklace of dried seaweed, each strand tied in a knot. You ask what it's for. Remembers waves when I don't, he says. 5 knots for the coast, 10 for the islands. If I forget where I am, I smell the seaweed and feel it come back. Odd, brilliant, mildly damp smelling. In the afternoon, the wind dies down. The sails droop like wet laundry. But the boat still moves. Currents take over. The crew returns to wave counting. A man lies flat, ear to the deck. You imitate him. At first, you hear only creaks and groans. But then, yes, there it is, the rhythm. Subtle, familiar, 3 slow, 1 sharp. Someone says, "We're nearing the shifting shelf." That's when you notice the changes. The roll becomes uneven. The bow dips more than before. Someone hangs fish scales from a thread and watches how they sway. Shelf confirmed. They nod. Fringe scholars talk about the gut compass. The idea that long-term sailors develop an inner calibration. You always thought that was sailor folklore, but you've been at sea for 6 days, and your stomach just did a little twitch that said, something's not right. You don't tell anyone. You don't need to. One of the sailors gives you a look like he felt it too. At dusk, the counting stops. You've arrived at a known point, the sea tooth. It's a jagged rock barely breaking the surface, named for the way it cracked a warship in half 2 dynasties ago. You drift past it in silence, heads bowed. Even the wind holds its breath. You reach out and touch the railing. The wood is warm now. Familiar. It doesn't feel like a barrier anymore. It feels like an extension of you. Like you've become part of the ship. And the ship part of the sea. And the sea part of some great memory that counts not in numbers, but in waves. You close your eyes, let yourself sway. And silently, you keep counting. The bowl sits on the deck like an offering. Bronze. Shallow. Carved with age-worn dragons and what might be sea cucumbers. You watch as a crew member fills it with water. Not from the sea, but from a clay jug kept cool and hidden. He sets it down, gives it a gentle tap, and then waits. You stare, waiting for something magical. It just sits there, rippling softly. Then you hear it. Ding. A pause. Ding. Fainter this time. Ding. That's not a bell. It's the bowl itself. Singing. Time, someone says, as if that explains anything. It sort of does. This is the Shuizhong water bell. Part timekeeper, part navigator, part meditation aid. It chimes based on the tension of the water and the movement of the ship. The sound carries a soft, rounded tone. Not like a clock, but like a whisper you almost misheard. It's used in rhythm with a sand glass and ancient hourglass, except it's filled with powdered shell grit. Not sand. More consistent. Someone insists. Sand lies, says the old sailor who flips it with a reverence usually reserved for deities and delicate buns. Together, the bowl and the glass form the heartbeat of the ship. You realize they're not just keeping time, they're using these pulses to measure distance by rhythm. For every glass rotation, a sailor paces the deck, counting how many swells pass, how many stars shift, how long it takes for the bowl to stop singing. Every step, every chime is a piece of a larger invisible clock. No seconds, no minutes, just rhythm. You ask a young sailor if they ever mess up the count. Oh yeah, he says. Once I skipped a ding and we ended up 2 hours east. Found ourselves chasing squid that didn't exist. He shrugs. Time's a rumor anyway. Historians still debate whether this kind of timekeeping was symbolic or scientific. The instruments were real sandglasses have been excavated from Ming shipwrecks, but how precise they were remains a mystery. Out here, though, precision isn't numbers. It's consistency. The goal isn't perfect math, it's reliable patterns. And that brings us to something you hadn't considered. Sea rhythm is also memory. The singing bowl's echo triggers the same reaction every time a change in duty. A sail adjustment, a meal, the repetition becomes ritual. You feel safer in its predictability. Like a bedtime story told at the exact same speed every night. Below deck, you find another strange object, a wooden board with pebbles glued to it in an uneven spiral. You ask what it is. Shift clock. The cook tells you, tossing a fish head into a pot. Each pebble is a ding. When the bowl sings, we move the string. There's a loop of twine that circles the pebbles like a clock hand. It's low-tech, messy, oddly brilliant. Don't you have a sundial or something, you ask? She laughs. What sun? She's got a point. The fog's thick enough to butter toast with. The sandglass gets flipped again. A new sailor takes the tiller. A new one climbs to the crow's nest. Everyone moves with a coordination that feels choreographed. No whistles, no clocks. Just the bowl, the glass, and the memory of the last time they heard the same sound. You're invited to flip the glass yourself. It's heavier than expected. The grit flows slower than modern sand, more deliberate, like even time has to pause and think before tumbling forward. You kneel next to the bowl, watching the surface settle. For a moment, nothing. Then the ship dips slightly with the swell, and the water sings again. Just once. High and clear. It echoes softly under the deck. One of the crew closes his eyes and nods. That one says west. He mutters. Wait, it says what? Direction. Tone changes with ship angle. You don't hear it, but he does. There's even a superstition tied to the bowl's voice. If the bowl sings twice and the second one's louder, they say you're chasing your own wake. That means you've circled back a sailor's shame. They say that happened once to a general's fleet, and rather than admit the mistake, he declared it a training maneuver. Bold. Later, you learn that some captains, especially in elite merchant fleets, would pair these instruments with song cycles. Literal sea songs whose tempo matched wave periods and wind rhythms. You're handed a scroll with delicate brushwork. It's a lullaby, but it also marks time intervals. The fourth verse, someone whispers, ends when the stars reach the boat's tail. And weirdly, it does. You're beginning to see how navigation without a compass wasn't guessing, it was orchestrating. Everything works together: water bowls, song tempo, body movement, sea rhythm. It's less map, more choreography. One sailor carries a pouch filled with metal bits, coins, bells, bone. Every hour, he rattles it and listens. Hollow clink means south wind. He insists. Damp coin means rain. You raise your eyebrows? He shrugs. Or I'm just bored. You lie back again. Let the bowl's echo fade. The sand glass trickles. The stars shift. Someone starts the lullaby again. You can't tell if it's midnight or noon, but the rhythm continues. The crew moves. And so do you, guided by sound, not sight. The fog is thick enough now that even your thoughts start to blur. You can't see the horizon. You can't even see the bow of the ship. The sea has swallowed everything: sky, stars, direction, reason, and left you bobbing in a bowl of mist and mystery. But the crew isn't worried. In fact, they seem calmer than ever. Which is strange because you're pretty sure this is the part in movies where the ghost ship shows up. No one runs to the helm. No one scrambles for a compass they don't have. Instead, the crew does something unexpected: they stop moving. The ship slows, and for a moment, complete silence. You're about to whisper, but a sailor raises his hand. Listen, he says. So you do. Nothing. Then something. A distant hiss. A soft splash. A low moan that could be wind or something older. The captain closes his eyes. That's coastline. He murmurs. What? The moan. 2 round for open sea. Echo off rock. And just like that, you understand the trick in fog. They navigate by sound. The sea becomes a whisper chamber. Every splash, every echo, every creak of rope becomes a message. Experienced sailors can tell how far they are from shore just by how the fog replies. A flat echo, open water. A warped one, cliff. A thump that never quite comes back, sandbank. You ask how they learn this. The first mate shrugs. Crash enough times, you start paying attention. Below deck, there's a long tube made of bamboo and lacquer. A foghorn? Nope. It's a listening cone. They hold it like a telescope. But to their ears, someone props it against a mast, closes one eye and listens with the other. Sounds bouncing left. Reef off the starboard? You borrow it and hear water, just water. But there's something to the rhythm. The drip, the breath, the invisible walls of air pressing back. You start to feel like the fog isn't hiding the world, it's sculpting it. There's an old superstition you overhear. Fog is the sea's way of turning invisible, to see if you still know her. You smile. That sounds about right. Another tool makes an appearance, a long wooden pole with a metal disc at the end. They dip it into the water and tap. Once, twice. Then they listen for the reply. Shallow echo. Someone mutters. Coral shelf. Maybe 5 li, eh? You marvel at the quiet confidence. There's no panic. No hasty decisions. Just method. Rhythm. Observation. One sailor hums a tune into the fog, then listens to how it returns. He shakes his head. That note got bent. Too close to rocks. You're led to the stern, where a sailor holds a bucket of dried beans. He tosses a handful overboard and listens. You think he's joking until you hear the soft scatter, some bounce, some land with little plops. Sound changes with depth. He explains. Deep water swallows. Shallow spits. Historians still argue about the reliability of these techniques. Were they real tools or just seafaring theater? But out here, the difference between folklore and function isn't the point. If it keeps you alive, it's valid. The ship changes course slightly, no announcement. Just a tilt. You realize the entire vessel is listening. The wood groans in conversation with the sea. The sails flutter once, then go still. It's not motionless, it's tuned. Another sailor holds out a tiny drum. Tight-skinned and flat. He taps it softly, once every few seconds. Echo drum, he says. Good for fog and caves. You listen. At first it sounds the same, but then one tap comes back quicker, shorter, closer. Ridge ahead, he says. They change heading. You pass someone muttering numbers under his breath. Not seconds, not waves. He's counting fade. Someone explains. Sound fade tells how thick the fog is and how far it'll carry. You don't know how he learned that. And honestly, you're not sure you want to. Some knowledge feels inherited, not taught. There's a game played below deck for training years. Two sailors hum notes into pots of water, then switch. Each has to guess what changed volume, pitch, distance. It's like musical hide and seek. The winner gets extra rice. The loser has to scrub eel guts. Motivation matters. You try humming into your cupped hands and listening. It sounds dull. Bad echo. Someone says laughing means you're full of nonsense. Fair enough. Even your breath feels like it matters here. You breathe too loudly and someone gives you a look. The fog listens back, he says. As night drags on, the mist grows colder. The sails take on moisture and drip like trees in the rain. But the crew is animated now, every footstep muffled, every sound observed. You realize how alive the fog has made the ship. No one's sleeping. No one's yelling. They are feeling their way forward with ears and instinct. Fringe theories suggest that elite navigators train themselves like bats, using soft clicks and echoes to map their surroundings. No proof, but when the fog thickens and the clicks begin, you're not so sure it's a theory anymore. Eventually, there's a shift, a certain openness to the air. The fog still lingers, but the echoes have changed. They no longer bounce, they fade, which means you're clearing open sea again. The captain nods once. Out of the dragon's breath, he says, You didn't see land. You didn't see a reef, but you passed them all the same by sound alone. You lean on the rail, fog dripping from your sleeves. The sea hums under you, still and soft, and you begin to understand when sight fails. Sound leads. The fog lifts like a curtain at a slow, stubborn play. There's no sunrise, just a graying of the dark, a soft reveal of the horizon's uncertain edges. The crew doesn't cheer or point. They simply exhale, stretch their backs, and move into the next rhythm. You, on the other hand, are blinking at the sight above you. A triangle of birds slices through the sky. Not seagulls or crows, but thick-bodied, slow-flapping marsh birds. They're headed home, someone says. Means land's behind us. We're deeper in now. Welcome to the world of avian navigation. You'd assumed birds were just scenery. Turns out they're more like unpaid air traffic controllers. The sailors know which birds prefer coastal water, which hover over reefs, and which never stray far from fresh water. Watching birds isn't an idle pastime, it's directional intelligence. A string of white herons means marshland, no birds at all. Deep ocean, a sudden appearance of gulls. You're near a fishing fleet or their discarded guts. You shade your eyes and watch. A lone black bird skims low over the water, then veers inland. One sailor notes it aloud. Land to port, maybe 10 lie. No compass, just wings. There's another clue in the sky clouds. Not just whether they exist, but what they look like and how they move. A young crewman is lying on his back, arm outstretched, drawing cloud shapes with his finger. See that long curl, he says. That's land-warmed air pushing up from a forested coast. You squint. It looks like a dragon having a nap, and that puff under it means the soil's wet. Probably rice paddies inland. He's not guessing. He's diagnosing. Ancient navigators relied on clouds not for their shapes, but for their behavior. A sudden bloom of high cirrus meant dry air over land. Low, fast-moving clouds with flat bottoms, sea moisture being drawn toward shore. One cloud is swelling straight up like dough rising in a clay pot. A sailor whistles. Storm building. Not here there. He points west. Monsoon trail. He's not worried it's 3 days away. By his guess. Still, he records it in a little notebook made from stitched mulberry bark. One cloud, one note. Memory by sky. Historians still debate how formal this sky-watching practice really was. Were there actual cloud atlases aboard early Chinese ships? Or was it entirely oral, just passed from one squinting sailor to the next? One fringe idea suggests a few elite pilots use smoke clouds on purpose, lighting fires on shore to mimic natural plumes and confuse rival fleets. Sea camouflage by way of controlled burning. Risky, ingenious, smoky. The crew suddenly becomes alert. A small formation of birds rises from the sea. Not from land. Floating logs? Someone guesses. Driftwood clumped up. Maybe a dead turtle. Then the call goes out. Fish nearby. You don't understand the connection. Turns out, birds circle fish. Where seabirds dive, there's food. And where there's food, there's current cold or warm, depending on the species. They steer slightly east, not for the fish, but for the current that brought the fish here in the first place. Nature leaves trails. You just have to know how to read them. Later, a sailor points out a sundog, a false sun created by ice crystals, glowing faintly beside the real one. Only shows near land, he claims. You raise an eyebrow. In this sea? He adds that part quickly. Even the smell of the air is changing again. You taste charcoal and herbs, not sea salt. Someone grins. Villages burning lunch. It's so faint you wonder if you're imagining it. But sure enough, within a few hours, a faint gray line appears at the edge of the sea. Not smoke, mountains. Birds increase. They crisscross overhead like a living compass. You feel oddly emotional. You've been so long without sight of solid land that the very idea of it, of dirt and trees and dumpling carts, feels mythical. But don't be fooled. Land doesn't mean safety. You're still far from port. The coast is riddled with reefs and wrecks and fast-shifting sands. The birds help, but now it's the clouds that matter most. You notice the crew shifting sail not by rope tension, but by sky hue. The light's changing less yellow, more silver. Land wind. Someone mutters. Color's colder. You never realized color could guide a ship. But it's not about sight, it's about feel. How light bounces. How the air thickens. A sailor crouches and picks up a clump of moss from the railing. It's barely visible. Green-gray and damp. He sniffs it. Salt's thinner. Air's filtered by trees now. The idea that moss has something to say is hilarious. Until it starts sounding logical. One man begins humming. Not a tune. Exactly. More like a scale. He's testing the wind again, not with a flag or a rope, but with his voice. If the note bends, he adjusts his heading. You don't even question it anymore. There's a deep sense of respect for these natural signs. Not worship exactly, but partnership. The sea, the birds, the sky, they're not obstacles. They're allies. As long as you know how to ask, you lean on the rail, face to the breeze, eyes tracing the cloud trails. You don't know where you are on a map, but your gut tells you you're getting close. The wind sharpens, not in strength, but in tone, like it's whispering through a slight different flute. The sails snap once and settle. A hush moves through the crew. It's subtle but unmistakable. You've entered new waters, and someone's nose twitches. It smells like fish sauce, the cook says, sniffing. But not ours. You scoff, you can tell. He narrows his eyes. Ours has star anise. That's coastal lime. And just like that, welcome to the next stage of ancient navigation scent. You wouldn't believe it if you weren't standing here, breathing in the sea air like a sommelier at a soup stand. But the truth is, early sailors often relied on the drift of smell to tell them where they were or where they were going. Over the bow, a faint breeze carries more than wind. It carries smoke, salt, sweetness. Somewhere nearby, someone is steaming something fragrant. Rice, perhaps, or dried longan fruit. A few sailors perk up. City's close, one says. Smells like market day. You begin to notice how the wind has layers, top notes of charcoal, mid notes of brine, and a finish of something you can only describe as pickled radish. It's bizarre and weirdly poetic. The closer you get to civilization, the more human the sea begins to smell. Scent was especially critical in areas like river mouths and coastal inlets, where landmarks looked the same and sight alone wasn't enough. Historians still argue how much scent-based navigation was instinct versus training. Was it accurate? Were ancient noses that skilled? One fringe theory suggests certain ships kept scent logs, literal planks rubbed with known coastal herbs, used to compare wind scent as they neared different ports. There's no firm archaeological proof, but out here, you don't need it. You just need a good sniffer. Someone lights a cone of incense and holds it into the breeze. Not for ritual, this is a wind tracer. The smoke bends, splits, and then does something odd, it corkscrews. The sailor frowns. That's not sea wind. It's land wind bouncing off a cliff. And so the ship veers slightly north. You're beginning to understand that ancient navigation wasn't about tools. It was about layers of awareness. A sailor would wake, sniff the wind, taste the air, squint at a bird, and know more than a whole GPS readout. Midday brings another olfactory shift. The smell is sharper now. Tangy. Something like fermented soybeans and river mud. Salt flats, says the old man with a frog gourd. City nearby dries their brine on bamboo trays. Air carries it. You see no land, but you can smell people. Their food, their firewood. Even the kind of tree sap they burn in their stoves. Pine for the inlanders. Mangrove for the coast. One crewman teaches you a trick: lick your wrist. Let it dry, then sniff. It sounds ridiculous, but you try it and you actually do pick up a change. Before clean salt, now faint oiliness. Oil lanterns, he confirms, means docks. Some ships burned certain herbs while entering port not for luck, but to blend in with local smells so the wind wouldn't betray them to competitors. Scent camouflage. It's espionage by incense. You chuckle. What happens if someone sneezes? He shrugs. Wrong sneeze can send you to the wrong province. Another sailor opens a clay jar and holds it high like a chalice. Inside citrus peel and seawater. He sniffs, tilts his head, and nods. Still a day out. Not sharp enough yet. This is not science in the modern sense, but it is sense, honed by years of exposure. If you grew up where the river met the sea, where merchants boiled seaweed for salt and fishmongers grilled eels before dawn, your nose knows. Fringe scholars believe some elite navigators could tell what side of a peninsula they were on, based solely on what type of resin smoke reached them first. Tall tale? Probably. But considering what your own nostrils have accomplished lately, who knows? In the afternoon, you finally glimpse at a thread of gray along the horizon. It's not a cloud, it's smoke fine, spiraling, and unmistakably from land. The crew murmurs affirmations. A few bow their heads. One offers a dried orange peel to the sea. "Thanks for not killing us," he mutters. You stand at the prow, inhaling deeply. You smell garlic, wood ash, salt, sweat, and something else life. Land life. The scent of people doing people things. And suddenly, after days of navigating by stars, swells, and sea song, you arrive by your nose. No compass, no map. Just the faint drift of someone making soup a few miles inland. The sun dips lower, dragging the sky into molten gold. You're standing beside a crewman coiling a strange mat of bamboo strips and twine. And at first, you assume it's fishing gear. But he rolls it out like a scroll, revealing what looks like a strange, abstract spiderweb of shells, knots, and polished coral pieces. He nods to it proudly. "Chart," he says. "Old style? You blink. That's a map." He grins, kind of. "Welcome to the world of shell maps, an ancient, tactile, memory-based navigation system used in parts of Asia and the Pacific. And yes, in select Chinese seafaring circles too. No ink, no paper, just lines, curves, and objects woven together, encoding a mental geography." He points to a cowrie shell lashed to a cord. That's the reef off Qiandao. Then a small stone fishing shoal. A piece of wood shaved thin as paper drift path in monsoon season. These maps aren't meant to be looked at while sailing, they're memorized beforehand. They function more like rehearsal scripts than reference tools. Before departing, a sailor might run his fingers over the entire mat for hours, tracing routes, recalling ocean patterns by touch, not sight. You try it. The shells are cool and smooth. The chord's taut. There's a rhythm to it, reef. Island, current, fish path, wind turn. A kind of braille for the ocean. Someone hands you a short bamboo flute. "Play the route," he says. You raise an eyebrow. But then he demonstrates blowing soft notes in a sequence that corresponds to the chart. High for wind, low for reef, staccato for shoal. "Songs help you remember," he explains. "Every village has their version. This is how you learn melody maps, passed down like sea shanties with secret meanings. Sailors sang their way across oceans, not for morale, but for navigation." Historians still argue how widespread this practice was. Some say only islanders use such systems. Others insist that the most experienced Chinese captains employed them during long voyages, especially to Southeast Asia and the island chains beyond. The evidence is murky, like so much in maritime history. But what's certain is this memory and music replaced ink and compass. You ask how anyone could remember so much. The captain smiles and lifts his shirt slightly to reveal his tattooed ribs. Not dragons or poetry, but dots, lines and symbols. tiny etchings that mimic the chart you just saw. Each one is a clue, a wind notch, a reef warning, a distance measure. Not decorative, functional ink. You're stunned. You carry your map on your body. He shrugs. What if the chart falls overboard? You glance around. Several other sailors have similar tattoos thighs, backs, shoulders. One even has wave patterns circling his ankles. You imagine him standing in the surf, checking the swirl of his legs against the pulse of the tide. It's strangely beautiful. There's a reverence in the way they speak of these things. Not superstition respect. Each shell is a memory. Each knot, a warning. The idea of using sight alone to steer feels almost reckless. Later, the crew gathers to rehearse a sea song low, droning, rhythmic. At first, it sounds like a lullaby, but then you catch the pattern. The verses aren't just lyrics, they're instructions. Past the shark's path, bend east to chase the bonefish. 2 hills sharp, turn west to follow the long cloud. The melody is a coded itinerary, passed generation to generation. There's an old sailor near the stern who hasn't spoken all day. Now he hums a single descending note. The crew immediately lowers one of the sails by 2 turns. You blink. What just happened? That's the tune for Shallows ahead. Someone explains. No shouting, no charts, just a tune. Even the mast has notches you missed before subtle carvings that mark turning points. You run your fingers along them. Each one corresponds to a change in wind, or an upcoming current, or a ritual offering spot. The ship itself is a map, and you've been too modern to see it. As twilight settles in, someone lights a lantern carved with 4 holes in a specific pattern. The light spills onto the deck in a star shape. One sailor hums the corresponding navigation chant. Its call and response light guiding song. Fringe scholars have theorized that some long-distance sailors even composed full operas epic, multi-day musical journeys where each act matched a different stretch of ocean. Insane, maybe, but out here where memory matters more than metal, it's genius. You're asked to sing a verse. You mangle it. Everyone laughs kindly. A sailor nudges you. That line you sang wrong. You just sent us into a whale nursery. He chuckles. They'll forgive you. Before you sleep, you pass the shell map one last time. You trace it slowly. Reef, tide, island, storm, landfall. You hum the tune. Softly. It stays with you. You realize that these charts don't just show you where to go. They tell you where you've been. They are memory made visible and audible and personal. You rest your head against the hull, the rhythm of the sea thumping gently beneath. And in your dreams, the shells begin to sing. The ship groans as it tilts into a sharper wind, and your dreams evaporate like sea mist. The morning sky is bruised purple, and the water suddenly got that hard glint like it's daring someone to make the next mistake. You stagger to the deck, rubbing your eyes, just in time to meet a man with shark teeth tattooed across his thighs. He's not a pirate. He's the pilot. He squats barefoot on the rail, chewing something fibrous and red that stains his teeth like he's been snacking on raw rubies. He nods once at you, then turns back to the sea. You notice he has no tools, no map, no notebook, just a jagged row of inked teeth wrapping his legs, and a scar on his temple that looks like it was earned in a sword fight or a shipwreck. He is, you're told, one of the waymen, the elite few who memorize coastlines, reefs, whirlpools, and hidden currents by heart. No one outranks the captain, but no one ignores the pilot. This is his domain now. You've reached unfamiliar waters, unfriendly waters, and this man knows every sneaky eddy and jagged coral tooth lying in wait. He mutters a few numbers, not coordinates, depth markers. He knows where the ocean floor buckles, where it rises like an ambush. He's not guessing. He's remembering. You ask about the tattoos. Each tooth is a reef, he says. Bit me once. Now I carry them. You blink. You mean actual shark bites. He grins, displaying one chipped tooth. A few. Others are stone teeth reefs that cut hulls in half. Better to carry the scars than repeat them. You sit beside him. He's tapping his knuckles against the deck, slow, syncopated. A beat. You realize he's counting wave rhythm against ship speed, judging when the next submerged hazard will appear. There's no calculation, no chart, just body memory and instinct. The crew treats him like a relic, not reverently, not fearfully, but with the kind of respect you give someone who's outlived more than he's lost. He once led a ship back through a typhoon backwards. They say steering by the sound of the rain hitting the hull. Fringe tales claim pilots like him could even smell different types of coral. That might be pushing it, but when you see him dip his finger in the water, sniff it, then spit on the deck and say, "Mussel Reef, West," you start questioning your own disbelief. Historians often debate whether these pilots were trained by formal guilds or just born into it. Sons of sailors raised on salt water and storm lore? No one agrees. What they do agree on without these men? Ships died. You ask how he trains. He points to his legs. Swim the reef. Learn by loss. One wrong stroke. You bleed. 2 wrong strokes. You drown. But you remember. He lifts a foot and shows a web of scars across the arch. Coral. Sea urchin. Rope burn. Each one's a map, he says. You look again at the tattoos. Some are clean and precise. Others shake slightly, like they were drawn mid-sail in rough water. None are decorative. All are records. Later, he kneels beside a small firepot near the helm and burns a leaf. The smell is sharp, almost spicy. He lets the smoke rise, then observes how it curls. Wind off the point, he mutters. Backdoor current pulling west. You glance around, nothing visible. But the captain nods and adjusts the sail. This pilot doesn't speak in directions. He speaks in warnings. Kelp ahead. Wave from the south has memory. Don't trust the third swell. The crew doesn't question him. They just obey. You ask if he's ever been wrong. Once he says, then nothing else. You leave it there. That night, he shows you something rare, a bone pin carved with strange symbols. It's a tide marker, tied to the moon's cycle and a specific river mouth. Stick it in the sand, he explains. If the tide covers the first notch by sunrise, you've got 3 hours before the whirlpools wake up. Do you carry it everywhere? He shakes his head. I remember it. This one's just to teach. In many ancient fleets, only a few men like him existed. They were the secret routes. You couldn't sail without them. Even rival captains paid bribes to borrow their memory. In some coastal communities, their bodies were buried facing the sea, so their knowledge would return to the tide. Whether symbolic or sincere, it speaks to how valuable these human compasses were. The pilot finally lies down on the deck, not in a bed, eyes half closed, still listening. You realize he never sleeps fully. Even his dreams are likely navigational. You feel the ship shift again. A new current. The reef teeth beneath the waves, waiting to test your hull. But the pilot already knows. His breath changes. His head lifts. And with a grunt and a glance, the ship turns. You're still afloat. Because he remembered, you wake to silence. Not the kind that calms you, but the kind that feels like something's holding its breath. The sea is glass now. No ripples, no wind. Just a smooth, eerie stillness that makes you wonder if the world stopped spinning while you napped. The sails hang limp, bored and empty. The crew isn't panicking. Not yet. They move slowly, like monks in meditation. One man ties a red cloth to the masthead. Not for decoration, it's to watch for invisible movement. To see if even the faintest puff dares stir. You're adrift. And this is when you meet the other method of ancient navigation dead reckoning. There's no wind, no stars, no current to speak of. Just memory, math, and more than a little nerve. The ship has to move somehow, and the crew needs to know where it would be if it were. Dead reckoning means estimating your position based on time, speed, and direction. And here, without instruments, they rely entirely on instinct and routine. You see it begin the pacing. One sailor walks the length of the deck, heel to toe, muttering to himself. Another traces a circle on the tiller with a stick of chalky powder marking where the rudder last sat. So if it shifts even slightly, they'll know. A third brings out a log. Not a book, a literal log. They drop it into the water, attached to a rope with knots tied every few body lengths. As it drifts behind the motionless ship, they count how many knots slip through their fingers over time. Yes, this is where the term knots comes from. Now you know. You try it yourself. The log barely moves, but the sailor nods anyway. We drift. Slow. Southeast. Good enough. It's not glamorous. There are no poetic birds or singing stars today. Just guesswork backed by memory. And the kind of quiet confidence that says we've done this before. Historians still debate how accurate ancient dead reckoning could be. Some say they were off by miles every day. Others argue experienced crews could keep within a narrow corridor for weeks using only these simple calculations. A fringe theory suggests some sailors used pulse tracking, synchronizing walking pace with heartbeat, turning their own bodies into makeshift chronometers. You laugh at first until you notice a sailor tapping his wrist with his thumb in slow, consistent rhythm. It's like breathing math, he says. Another crewman begins sketching figures in spilled rice on the deck. Circles. Arcs. X's. We moved 1 li per hour. Wind started dying 10 hours ago. Current came from the north. So he blows the rice away and points over the port rail. We're near the stone tooth. Probably. The pilot from earlier grunts. Stone tooth's 20 li behind. No, the rice mapper says. The current pulled us. The debate isn't hostile, it's part of the ritual. Everyone weighs in. One sailor makes a guess based on how stiff his knees feel. We tilt different now. Less chop. Means we're further south. Another holds a drop of oil in a spoon and floats it in seawater. The oil slowly spreads. She watches how it disperses. Spreads fat to the west. Wind wants to return soon. Still no compass. Still no wind. But the ship begins turning slowly. Not from wind, but from choice. The captain trusts the collective gut. He walks the deck in slow, heavy steps, counting, feeling, weighing the mood of the hull. The wood groans faintly its own kind of confirmation. Below deck, you find another tool aboard with pebbles arranged in arcs. Each pebble represents 1 hour of drift. The arcs show hypothetical positions. The navigator touches each one like a prayer bead, considering where you might be, where you might have ended up, and more importantly, where not to go. There's an unspoken understanding no one knows exactly. But together, they know enough. You ask the cook how far off course they've been before. Once 5 once 50. Depends on whether someone lies. You laugh. Lies about what? About the wind. About how much rice they ate. About whether they were awake during the shift. You don't ask if it was him. A quiet moment comes. The ship still hasn't moved. But a bird lands on the yardarm, fluffing its feathers like it owns the place. A sailor nods from the southwest. Can you tell that just from the bird? No, I can tell it from his shadow. What? You'll understand in a year. You probably won't, but you smile anyway. Dead reckoning. You realize isn't just guessing, it's summing every sense, memory, and story, and trusting that the picture it builds is close enough. It's less about exactitude and more about getting lost gently in a way that still lets you come home. And just as you begin to believe in nothing but drift, the red cloth tied to the mast flutters. A puff, the tiniest breeze. It might not be much, but it confirms everything they just guessed. You were headed the right way all along. The crew nods, adjusts the sail, turns the tiller. The ship resumes its course. Not because of tools, not because of stars, but because they believed what they were. And that was enough. You hear the word before you feel the shift spoon. It's murmured like a warning, not shouted, just passed from lip to lip with the weight of something both feared and holy. You sit up. The sky is overcast, heavy as a closed eye. The waves have thickened, and the helmsman is holding something that looks like a ladle made of bronze, resting on a square board. But this isn't soup night. This is the magnetic spoon, a relic from ancient China that predates the modern compass. Shrouded in legend and caution. You've read about it in dusty books. You never thought you'd see one out here, being handled with such quiet tension. It's shaped like a ladle. Yes, but the bowl is flattened slightly, the handle curved like a dragon's tail. And it's made of lodestone, naturally magnetized iron ore, balanced carefully on the smooth surface of a polished bronze plate. It spins slowly and, when undisturbed, points to the south. Not north, south. That was the Chinese preference. In their cosmology, south was the direction of warmth, civilization, even wisdom. And so their earliest compasses, if you can call this a compass, were tools of orientation, not navigation. They didn't show you how to get somewhere. They told you where you were in relation to the world's natural order. The pilot watches it like it might bite. The spoon doesn't like open sea. Someone mutters. You frown. Why not? He taps the board. Too many lies out here. You realize they don't entirely trust it. They use it, yes, but warily, as if it's the least reliable of their tools. Not because it doesn't work, it spins well, and it does point, but because the sea can interfere. Lodestone reacts to the Earth's magnetic field, but with enough iron in the hull, or certain mineral-rich currents below, the reading can drift. Even the moon, some say, can nudge its truth a few degrees off. Historians still argue, says the navigator, whether the old ones used it on ships at all or only in temples and land rituals. He sets the spoon gently in its holder and steadies it with a breath. It spins once, slows, points. South, he says. The captain raises an eyebrow. Storms west. That tracks. They don't steer by it? Not exactly, but it becomes one more layer of knowing a sanity check against the clouds. Waves and whispers. You ask how they keep it still during a storm. We don't. The pilot says, we listen to its lies and try to hear the truth underneath. Fringe scholars have written poems. Actual poems about the magnetic spoon, One claims it was originally a cosmic mirror, reflecting not direction, but fate. Another insists it was a tool of royal geomancers, stolen by sailors desperate for an edge over storm and star. You glance at it again. It's not glowing. It's not floating in the air. But you swear the moment you look away, it moves. Later, a sailor lays out 8 paper hexagrams, weighted at the corners with smooth stones. It's a bagua, the 8 trigrams of Taoist cosmology. He spins the spoon again, watching where it settles, and aligns it with the diagram. It wants Zhen. He mutters. Thunder rising. He pulls his coat tighter. You ask, so, you're doing fortune-telling now. Fortune's just navigation in disguise, he replies. And you're not sure he's wrong. The ship keeps moving. The spoon is put away not in a case, but in a cloth pouch stitched with characters that ward off corruption. It's not sacred. It's not mechanical. It's somewhere in between. A whisper from the earth. If the earth could whisper over the roar of waves. As night falls, the spoon is brought out again, but this time not to guide the ship. A younger sailor sits with it, watching it spin like a toy. He hums. No words, just a note. He's calibrating his ears, matching the spoon's spin to the rhythm of the boat. Not for direction, for balance. If it spins right, the hull is clean. If it spins wrong, the ballast shifted. This is knowledge no one writes down. You learn it by repetition, by listening to something old enough to feel like it was here before people walked upright. The next morning, a crow lands on the mast. The pilot glances up. That confirms it. He mutters, Spoon was right. You're nearing land again. Not because a needle said so, but because an old stone spoon danced in the right direction and no one laughed. Night again. The sea glows faintly not from moonlight, which is smothered behind thick clouds, but from something stranger, something alive. You rub your eyes. The ship's wake is lined with a faint green shimmer. It pulses with the boat's motion, stretching behind like a ghost tail. And when you drag your fingers through the water, they come out trailing sparks. Tiny stars flicker along your skin and vanish before you can blink twice. Bioluminescence. The crew calls it dragonfire. They don't dissect it. They don't need to. To them, it's not science, it's navigation in the dark. You're entering the most surreal chapter of your voyage, the art of following light that doesn't come from the sky. The ship barely needs a lantern. Its hull glows from below as it cuts through swarms of plankton that flash when disturbed. The sailors use it like a trail of breadcrumbs. If the wake bends wrong, they've gone off course. If it dims, they've drifted into colder, deeper waters. If it brightens too suddenly, shallows, possibly rocks, or worse, sea snakes. You lean over the edge and watch a swirl of color spiral from the oar dipping just below the surface. Someone calls. She likes the temperature, and you realize they're speaking about the ship like it's an animal, responding to the water's light. They steer now by instinct and illumination patterns. Bright green means dense plankton, nutrient-rich currents, often near reefs or river mouths. Pale blue, wider open water. Occasional gold sparks. No one knows. But the sailors whisper about ghost shoals, sandbanks that appear only during specific tidal combinations. Unmapped, unmarked, deadly. The helmsman has a trick. He dips a weighted rope over the side and watches how the bioluminescent glow creeps up it. 3 spans, he mutters. Warm ridge, we're close. You ask how he knows. Glow climbs faster in warmer layers. This isn't science fiction. This is ancient feedback from living light. and it's been around longer than the compass ever dreamed. Historians still argue whether sailors truly used bioluminescence as a primary tool, or simply interpreted it when it appeared. The argument misses the point. Whether intentional or intuitive, it worked. A fringe claim from the Song Dynasty records suggests some ships even bred fire sea worms in jars, tossing them into the water to read current patterns by how they drifted and blinked. You don't see any jars here, but you wouldn't be shocked if one floated by. There's a moment of absolute silence. The boat's movement stills. The glow beneath flattens. Then a sudden ripple of light, like lightning passing just under the keel. The crew freezes. "Squid bloom," the cook mutters. "Time to steer clear." And just like that, they shift course. No compass, no stars. Just a warning written in underwater fire. Even the sails glow faintly now. Or maybe it's your imagination. You've spent too long staring at the sea, trusting its cues, absorbing its lessons in scent and song and rhythm. Now it's speaking in luminescent flashes, and your brain is finally listening. One sailor walks the rail with a stick dipped in fish oil. He waves it just above the water, watching how the glow follows. "Current's playful tonight," he says. "She's winding west." There's an eerie, dreamlike quality to all this. You feel untethered from time. The stars are absent. The wind is shy, and yet the ship moves, sure as ever, trailing its own glowing constellation behind it. You ask if they ever get scared? Only when the light vanishes. What does that mean? Depth, or death, or both? You look down, still glowing. Good. Later, you spot something in the water that doesn't glow. A dark streak, slithering beneath the surface like a shadow that refused to play along. The pilot watches it with a grimace. "Dead current," he says. It's a strip of water with no light response, colder, heavier, and dangerous. Ships stuck in those zones drift endlessly, unable to catch wind or ride current, like sailing through jelly. Someone says they steer away from it, using the glow's absence as a compass. At midnight, the sea erupts briefly bursts of blue-white light spinning like wheels. Flying fish, a sailor says, grinning. They like to show off. And indeed, tiny forms break the surface and sail through the dark, tails glowing like neon streamers. You sit back and take it all in. This is no longer just a voyage. It's a light show from the planet's bloodstream. And here, in the dark, without stars or compass, you realize how much nature wants to be read. If you're quiet enough, if you're slow enough, if you're willing to listen to even the glow of plankton as it brushes your fingertips. Eventually, clouds shift, a sliver of moon appears, but it feels unnecessary now. The sea is already glowing with its own guidance. The storm doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in slowly, like a lie you've chosen to ignore. First, the sky turns that strange greenish color too pale, too flat, like a bruised pear. The wind begins to speak in a lower register, grumbling beneath the sails. Then, the pressure changes. You feel it in your ears. You taste it in the air. Everything becomes thicker, heavier, like the sky itself is leaning down to listen. The crew moves with unhurried precision. No panic, no yelling. Just the ritual of men who have done this before, who know the sea's moods like family. The pilot glances up from his crouch near the stern. Storm's faking sleep. He mutters, "She'll turn quick." You've read about this in books, ancient sailors predicting storms not by barometer, but by breath, bone, and instinct. Now you're living it. You watch them sniff the wind, listen to the boom of distant thunder, Check how their skin prickles along the arms. One man spits into the water and watches how it spreads. Too fast, he says. We've got hours. No more. You glance toward the horizon. A dark bulge is rising there, slow and sure as a whale's back. One sailor lifts a strip of paper from a lacquered box and holds it flat to the wind. It flaps once, then stills. Wet wind, he says. Smells like red earth. Might come from inland. They begin shifting sail not down, but angled, anticipating the way the storm will curve rather than strike head-on. No one asks for permission. The ship is preparing like it's tying its own shoes. You spot the captain scratching at a painted gourd hanging by his side. Not superstition, it's a pressure charm, they say. Carved with symbols that curl when humidity spikes. Sure enough, one of the spirals is beginning to peel. He frowns and tucks it away. Historians still argue whether these signs were reliable or just rituals for morale. But here's the truth: when every inch of sail and grain of rice is survival, you don't need instruments, you need awareness. A young sailor climbs to the crow's nest not for lookout, but to check how the top of the mast vibrates. Too much hum bad sign. Right now, it thrums like a wasp's nest. Storm's singing. He calls down. Below, someone sharpens an oar. You raise an eyebrow. In case we lose rudder, he says. She still listens to wood. The pilot shows you a strip of silk, dyed in faded colors. He tosses it in the wind, and instead of watching how it flaps, he watches how it doesn't. See that pause, he says. Wind's holding its breath. Even that the stillness before the fury is information. The storm strikes at twilight. Quick. Sudden. Not with a roar, but with a deep, thunderous shove. The first wave doesn't crash. It shifts the entire boat, like someone moving a rug with you on it. The crew braces. The sails groan. The hull creaks like it's praying. And still no compass. Only reaction. Adjustments by feel. The pilot grabs the tiller and shifts 3 degrees starboard. The cook throws a jar of pickled bamboo overboard. For the river god, she mutters. You ask if that helps. If he's hungry, it does. The waves begin to roll in now, stacking instead of slapping. You learn that's a sailor's warning sign. Sharp waves you can cut. Rolling ones bury you. The crew shifts cargo weight, moving sacks of rice like sandbags in a siege. The pilot licks his finger and tests the air again. His eyes close. She's curling, right? The captain nods. Turn into the curl. And so you do. The ship turns not into the eye of the storm, but along its hip, sliding through its fury instead of bracing against it. You realize that ancient sailors didn't conquer storms. They danced with them. There's a method here, even in the madness. If a gust comes low, they tilt the hull slightly to slip it. If rain hits warm, they adjust sail to balance with the pressure drop that will follow. They feel these things not with tools, but with bodies that remember. Someone tightens a line by biting it. Not chewing, biting. To feel whether the rope's tension is carrying the right pitch. Too dry, he says. Rain won't hold long. You're soaked now. Salt stings your eyes, but the crew moves like clockwork. Not mechanical musical. A rhythm under pressure. This isn't chaos, it's jazz. They let the waves lift them, then pull slightly left. Let the wind shove, then break with the rudder. You think of it as surfing on punishment. And when the storm's center passes sudden, jarring, like someone cut a string, the ship emerges. Whole, sails wet but proud, hull intact. Crew exhausted, soaked, and grinning like lunatics who just played poker with nature and walked away with all their limbs. One sailor slaps your back. Storms are easy. he says. They're loud, honest. You just have to listen. You look around. No compass, no radar, no forecast. Just a crew who knew how the wind hums before it lies, how the clouds sharpen before they bleed, and how a spoon, a scar, or a drop of rain can mean the difference between being found and forgotten. You sit back, shake the water from your hair, and you realize they didn't survive the storm because they fought it. They survived because they knew how to read its mood. The sea, after the storm, is stunned into stillness. The sky clears reluctantly, like a cranky child waking up from a nap. The clouds retreat, tattered and frayed, and a soft, uncertain sunlight filters through. The ocean beneath reflects none of its warmth. It's pale, waxy, as if unsure whether to return to its usual self or stay quiet a little longer. The crew, too, moves slowly, not because of injury or fatigue, but because this is the dangerous calm, the moment when overconfidence can ruin you faster than wind ever could. And now, in this eerie stillness, comes a new ritual, one quieter than stars, subtler than current. You see it begin with a glance between two sailors and the flick of a hand. They are communicating in code, but not with words. They are using gesture and chant, part of a long, hidden tradition where vital navigational information was passed in ways that outsiders would miss entirely. The helmsman stands at the stern, hands behind his back. One sailor near the mast scratches his nose 3 times with 2 fingers. The helmsman nods, adjusts the rudder by a thumb's width. You ask what that meant. He told him to brace for a cross current. The cook says, casually dicing ginger. With a nose scratch. Timing matters, she adds. And which hand? Left hand. It's about current. Right wind. She tosses the ginger into a pot. This is navigational signaling, and it's as old as the sea. Before compasses, before sextants, before flags and charts and radios, sailors developed silent systems to relay direction, location, and even danger. Why? Because at sea, especially in storm or stealth conditions, words fail. They get lost in wind. Or worse, they betray you. Historians still argue whether such systems were formal or improvised. Were they unique to each crew? Were they standardized? The records are scarce. On purpose. These were living traditions, not written ones. A sailor picks up a long pole and taps it against the deck in a slow rhythm. Not for attention. It's a message to the man up in the crow's nest. Tap, 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 pause, tap, South Shoal. Someone translates. Another sailor draws a symbol in wet ash on a barrel top, a triangle within a circle. A moment later, the pilot adjusts course. You think it's superstition, until you realize every symbol has a directional meaning, a kind of nautical shorthand handed down through repetition, not reading. You're handed a string of knot codes, short chords, different types of knots, each representing a warning or a location. Square knot, rock outcrop. Figure 8 sandbar, noose knot. Dangerous crosswind, you shake it like a charm bracelet. But to them, it's a tactile navigation tool. The first mate uses one as a teaching device, blindfolding a younger sailor and handing him the rope. He runs his fingers along it and recites, sharp reef, gentle current, 2 hours to inlet. Marked by double wave, all from texture. Some fringe theories claim this was part of a broader system, an oral and physical language meant to protect knowledge from outsiders. You don't need a compass if your entire ship is the compass, and your crew are its moving parts. Later, someone sings a brief line of a sea chant. Just 4 words. You don't think much of it until the pilot sings 2 words back. The chant is a call and response instruction. Verse 1 means prepare for turn. Verse 2 means adjust tiller and sail. Verse 3, if sung, would mean drop anchor. It never is. You begin to notice all the invisible strings that hold the ship together. A glance, a nod, the way a sailor tugs at his earlobe, and 3 others quietly shift weight to the starboard side. It's coordination at its most elegant navigation, disguised as daily motion. No shouting, no orders, just knowledge passed like a ghost. You ask the captain how long it takes to learn these signs. To remember a year, to mean them a decade. You ask what happens if someone forgets. He gestures at the open sea. Then we drift. You find yourself practicing, rubbing ash into your hands, copying the symbols, scratching your nose, glancing left, watching if anyone responds. One sailor catches you and laughs. You just ask the cook to throw you overboard. You smile. You're getting closer. Later, under a pinkening sky, someone draws a circle on the deck with salted water. Inside, he traces a line from edge to edge with a stick. Sun shadow here means we're 20 li from shore. It looks like play pretend, but the line matches the movement of the sun and the feel of the wind. Another kind of code. The captain finally speaks. Softly. We don't write it down because the sea erases ink. But the sea remembers gesture. And you do too. The ship continues forward, powered by no device. Guided by no arrow. But in every movement, every silent symbol, you are being steered. By hands, by glances, by signs whispered through salt and sweat. And the sea, somehow, understands. You're awake before the light returns. The sea, for once, is not the one that stirs you. It's the sudden sway of the crow's nest above and the faint creak of rope straining in anticipation. You glance upward and see him again, the lookout, curled like a cat in the basket of the mast, watching the sky, not the sea, not the waves, not the wind, the clouds. It's storm watching time, and not the kind where you wait for lightning and then run below deck. This is forecasting by intuition, drawn from decades of watching the sky lie, bluff, flirt, and frown. The sailor doesn't move, but his eyes dart side to side, following wisps of cirrus sliding west like messengers avoiding eye contact. He mutters something. You barely catch it. Long tails, late punch. What does that mean, you ask? Storm's coming slow, but she bites late. And that's your lesson for today, how ancient sailors read storms before they showed up. Not through instruments, but through observation, memory, and a healthy respect for being wrong. You're invited up the mast. It's a terrible idea, but you go halfway up. The wind shifts slightly. Not strong, but warm. Thick. It wraps around you like breath from a giant animal. You feel a flicker of fear, the kind you get when the forest suddenly goes quiet. The lookout says nothing, just points. And you see it, on the far western horizon, where the sky turns muddy. There's a wall of something not exactly cloud, not exactly smoke, just darkness with intent. Below, the crew is already adjusting sail. The pilot chews a sliver of something bitter. You ask what it is. Dry ginger. Clears the sinuses. Better smell. Better guess. You laugh. He's serious. Back on deck, another sailor throws a handful of dried leaves into the air. They twirl, spiral, hesitate. Turning counter, he says. The helmsman adjusts by 2 fingers. No thunder. No lightning. Just data in disguise gathered from sky texture, air taste, watercolor. Historians debate whether early Chinese ships had storm calendars, rotating boards, etched with symbols that helped guess incoming fronts. None have been found. But what has been recorded is the use of skilled human barometers, people who had been to sea so long they could sense the change in pressure in their elbows, knees, or jawbone. You're shown to a chart made not of ink, but of burn marks. Each singe on the wood corresponds to a storm survived. A burned corner, the typhoon of year 8. A black stripe, the wave that cracked 2 ships. This is a memory ledger, scorched into the ship's ribs. A younger sailor stands barefoot at the bow. He closes his eyes, his lips move. Silently. He's not praying. He's counting seconds between wind changes. 1, 2. Pause. 1, 2. Shift. Storm pivoting, he mutters. And so they change heading again. It's not because of cloud shape alone. It's how those clouds move compared to yesterday, and how the sea smells beneath them, and whether the sunset bled red or yellow. Tonight, it bled neither. It just dulled into a dirty peach. You ask the captain if they ever get it wrong. All the time, he says. But the sea lets us live when we're respectful, not when we're right. A gust hits sharp, angled, aggressive, and just like that, the ship leans. Everyone braces, not fearfully in sync. The pilot taps the rail twice. 2 quick bell tones from the lookout. Another gust, then stillness. She blinked. Someone whispers. The squall is testing. A slap, not a punch. They don't steer into it. They glide beside it, riding the edge of the storm, the way a brushstroke hovers near the border of a scroll without crossing the line. You look out and realize that this is reading nature's mood swings, not fighting them. Below deck, a woman opens a clay box of soft powder-pressed pollen and ash. She shakes a bit into a bowl and watches how it settles. Pollen sits fast. She says, air pressure dropped. She adjusts her cooking time, and she passes a note to the captain. Even dinner obeys the storm. One sailor checks the tide marks on the hull. Slippery barnacle trails that show how much the water has risen since dawn. Storms pushing ocean up the throat, he says. Coastline will breathe early tonight. You start to understand this is not about the storm. It's about the web of things it touches: fish migration, gull behavior, fungus on the hull. A true sailor doesn't fear the storm. He listens to everything the storm talks to. The clouds darken. Thunder speaks softly at first. The lookout slides down the mast, silent and certain. It's time, and no one argues. Sails come down. Anchor drops. Offerings are whispered tea leaves to the sea, a hairpin to the wind. You sit against the rail, watching lightning flicker inside the clouds like a lantern trying to escape a paper bag. And you realize this isn't the crew reacting to the weather. They've already responded, long before the storm arrived, because they knew how to read its footsteps. And in knowing that, they're already safe. You wake to a thud, soft and strange. Not like thunder, not like wave slap. No, this is something else. The sound of something familiar returning. You pull yourself upright and peer over the edge of the ship. There, low on the horizon, partly veiled by morning haze, is a dark green outline. Jagged, uneven. Land. But don't celebrate yet. You've heard the stories. Landfall can be more dangerous than open sea. Reefs, shoals. Sudden shallows, the sea saves its most cunning tricks for the last stretch. Ancient sailors feared the final mile more than the previous 100. And here's where it all converges. Everything you've seen, the chants, the shells, The sounds, the smells comes alive now. Because making landfall without a compass doesn't just mean finding any shore, it means finding the right one, at the right angle, at the right time, or everything breaks. The crew starts to whisper not to each other, but to the ship. Little murmured phrases. Stay soft. No teeth today. Don't bite the keel. It's half prayer, half instruction. The ship hears. It always does. The pilot steps forward. His tattoos shimmer with salt. He removes his shoes, touches the deck with both hands, and begins to hum. It's not for comfort, it's navigation. This is one of the last and strangest methods of orientation you'll witness, using memory-triggered landmarks to land without ever seeing them until the final second. He's watching birds. Sure flocks of cormorants sweeping left, then right, always turning before they reach a certain invisible line. There's a current wall there. He says, they feel it in their wings. You look, nothing is visible. But when he drops a plum blossom petal into the water, it spins. Current confirmed. You adjust course. There's a smell now. Sweet wood. Dry clay. River reeds. Someone nearby sniffs the air and smiles. Old settlement near the red cliffs, he says. They boil sandalwood for dye. Historians have documented how ancient navigators often recognized different port cities by scent before they ever saw them. And now here you are, sniffing your way to shore. You pass a cluster of floating bamboo. The crew tenses. Drift fence, someone says, means shrimp traps. Fishermen nearby. We're close. Another sailor drops a reed into the water and watches how it aligns with the hull. She's being pulled west, he murmurs. We're near the Copper Channel. You're still 20 li out. But they already know the neighborhood. Then comes the strange part. The pilot kneels, removes a pouch, and scatters its contents across the deck. Dried fish bones, a shell, and 3 curved twigs. He stares at them for a moment, then closes his eyes. You ask, what is that? Fool's map? He says, smiling. My teacher called it that. It's a memory aid, a kind of ritual visualization. Each object corresponds to a coastal landmark, one to a rock formation, one to the way the tide pulls around a river mouth, one to a whirlpool he once nearly died in. He's not scrying. He's remembering. You look over the rail again. The green shape of land is more defined now. Cliffs, dips, a cluster of trees like knotted fingers. The cook points. That's the praying monk hill. You frown. See how it bows to the sea. It does. The rock slopes forward in a curve, shadowed in just the right way. You'd have never noticed. The crew begins to sing. Not loudly a single slow verse, repeated under breath. You've heard the tune before. It's the one tied to a shell map you touched days ago. They're recalling the final stretch, each note linked to a reef, a wave pattern, a wind shift. Even the timing of their breath tells the tiller what to do. You sail forward. Not straight. Never straight. The approach bends like a crescent moon. That's the eel hook, someone says. The current wraps around the land here. Go too early. You get dragged south. Too late. You hit teeth. No compass points to this. Only song, smell, memory, and trust. At last the green becomes detail. Trees, shoreline, boats. Someone spots a flicker of orange, a shrine flag flapping on the headland. You wouldn't have seen it on your own. But the sailor next to you raises 2 fingers. We're here. And you are... The boat glides into a narrow channel like it belongs there. No bump. No scrape. Just the creak of ropes and the call of distant gulls. You made landfall, and you did it without a compass, without coordinates, without a single glowing screen. You did it because they taught you how to read the sea the way we once read stars. You step ashore. Your feet sink slightly into the sand. It feels solid, but part of you still listens for the tide. Because even now, you are carrying the ocean's language with you. The ship is docked now, tied with thick ropes to sun-bleached pylons carved by the tide. The crew has scattered, some unloading, some chatting with old friends who meet them on the sand, some simply lying in the shade of a tree, shoes off, eyes closed. You sit at the edge of the pier, toes dangling just above the water, watching the waves rock lazily against the hull like it's a child being soothed back to sleep. You've arrived, but somehow it doesn't feel like the end. The strange thing is no one seems surprised you made it. Not the pilot with tattoos like a tide chart, not the cook who could taste wind in her stew, not even the boy who counted waves like rosary beads. They all knew. Not in a confident, chest-thumping way, but in the quiet, unshakable sense that you always arrive when you listen properly. Because that's what this journey really was. Not a trip from A to B, but a rediscovery of something ancient, a way of moving through the world by trusting its whispers, not its instruments. The magnetic spoon was never the secret. Neither were the clouds, or the birds, or the singing bowl. It was you, your willingness to notice, to be wrong, to drift a little, and still find your way. Like the ship itself, you learned how to lean with the wind instead of fighting it. You counted waves instead of seconds. You used your skin, your ears, your nose. You felt the sea as something living, and it remembered your respect. You wander below deck one last time. Touch the shell map. Run your fingers along the carved notches on the mast. They don't explain things, they preserve them. Not for you, but really, for the next fool willing to listen. Onshore, someone lights a fire. The smoke curls upward, sweet and slow, just like the incense they used to read the wind days ago. You watch it drift inland, a gentle welcome home. You smile. Historians still argue whether these sailors were scientists, magicians, or just extremely lucky. Let them argue. You know now what they knew then when the world refuses to give you answers. It will always offer clues. All you have to do is stop shouting and start paying attention. Word count 1097. Wind down below. The sea is far behind you now, but its rhythm lingers in your bones. Your pulse still rocks gently in time with the waves. Your breath still finds the space between gusts. Even here, wrapped in stillness, the echoes of sails and stars and dragonfire glows still flicker behind your eyes. Let yourself soften into that memory. The salt drying on your skin, the wooden creak of the hull, the voices humming quiet verses you didn't understand but somehow followed. You didn't need to know every symbol, every signal. You only had to float, to notice, to remember. And now you do. Let the wind fall silent. Let the ropes go slack. Let the sea keep her secrets for now. You've heard enough. You are safe, you are ashore, and you are home.